Okay, so we're going to get cracking. So welcome to the final Transport Resilience Infrastructure Committee meeting for this year, and we will move into apologies. We have one apology for absence, which is Angela Dalton, and we have one apology for lateness, Josephine Bartley. So someone like to move those? Thank you, Richard. Seconded, Greg. Those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Yeah. I was going to say something, but I'm not, because you're here. We've had requests for electronic attendance, understanding order 3.3.3 for Hokura member Billy Brown, Alf, Lotu, Kieran to go later on, Deputy Mayor Desley to leave later on, Wayne Walker, John Watson and Morris.
Happy to move.
All. Thank you, Chris. Seconder? Yep. Thanks, Desley. Those in favour say aye, and against, carried. I do wonder whether we start to need to have a look at our standing orders in regards to electronic attendance and voting. But that's for another day.
Point of order, Chair, sorry. Do we have reasons?
Yep, so the reasons have been either A or B, which is there's no emergencies, but there is a number of ill health and other things. So they've all been, Lata goes through those with a fine-tooth comb and does go back to people and say, no, you provide us with a reason, and so they all fall within standing orders as they currently stand. Something for the new year. Okay, so next is declarations of interest. Oh, sorry. That's right, I was waiting for you.
Sorry, we did talk about this beforehand. So it's not a conflict of interest, but just acknowledging that my husband is presenting shortly on behalf of the union of which I am a member, but I've played no part in the preparation of the work that they're bringing to you today. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Julie. And just to note, Michael, she needs a new bike because it doesn't fit in the elevators at Newmarket.
I actually asked for new lifts.
That's right.
I asked for new lifts, not a new bike.
New lift.
Bike's fine.
Okay, confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 7th of November, which is an open meeting. Someone like to move? Thanks, Chris. Seconder? Thanks, Desley. Any discussion on those? None. All those in favour say aye. And against, carried. Public input. So we've had one request for public input, and so it is a pleasure to welcome up Michael Wood, I think Chris Rigby and Tane Hippolyte. Is that right? Tane, sorry mate. So welcome up. It's been a long time coming. We've bounced this one around a few times, and so great to see you here this morning. So the floor's all yours.
Oh, there you go, look at that. Tēnā koe, I'm Chris Rigby, Etu Organiser for TAU Auckland Live. Today I'm going to introduce to you Tane Hippolyte, who is one of our delegates at Auckland Live, or TAU, working out of the Aotea Centre. And what Tane will be talking about is the potential impacts that impending congestion charges may have on waged workers in the CBD, particularly those that work outside of the hours or hours that cross over the ones in which public transport operates. Just a bit more about the members that we cover, so not just TAU Auckland Live, but we cover many members in the roles of security, cleaning and hospitality around the Auckland CBD. I'll pass you on to Tane.
Kia ora, Chris. Forgive me, I've written down my words so that I don't get lost. But tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. My name is Tane. So I work for Tātaki Auckland Unlimited as part of the event services team. So I am speaking on behalf of our E2 members employed there. So we cover lots of different components, as Chris covered. So there's the security team, the housekeeping, cleaning team, the hospitality team, and the technical positions. And with this potential introduction of a congestion charge, my members are a little bit concerned about fairness. There's an acknowledgement there that with many white-collar jobs, there's an ability to adjust their travel times to avoid this charge. And I understand that that is completely one component of the intention to reduce congestion. However, with these workers typically working on lower wages with irregular hours, we have very specific start times and finish times. And so therefore the ability to adjust our travel time to avoid that charge is just not a fundamental option for us. So often we have very short shifts. 3-hour calls are not uncommon in our workplace. And so depending on how this congestion charge is set up, there is a concern that potentially these workers get double pinged, travelling in, travelling out of the CBD because of those higher cost of living, more people moving further and further out of the CBD, meaning that they're getting impacted, the potential to be impacted by this congestion charge. So using myself as an example, just touching on, in the last couple of months, I've had a wide range of start and finish times, anywhere between a 4 or 5 a.m. start through to 1 a.m. finishes, but I often have also had many 7:30, 8 a.m. starts, so it really jumps around when we're impacted, how we could be impacted by the congestion charges. So a common justification talking about the congestion charge is that encouragement to use public transport. However, this rationale does fall short for those of us who have worked in the CBD, where we work outside of public transport hours. So for these guys, there is no other option available. And the complexities with public transport, such as multiple factors with transfers and frequent bus services, add to the complexities. There have been other changes as well in regards to on-street parking and the loss of subsidies for public transport that also make these options expensive. But just as an example, for this evening itself, Eastern Line, Southern Line, Western Line are all impacted by scheduled maintenance, meaning that there won't be certain trains running, meaning that rail buses are being used instead. Rail buses are often less accessible, often don't allow people to take bicycles upon them. They also are smaller than trains, so there can be other issues associated with it. Coming back to the point, I guess, is imposing this extra financial burden could render, for my colleagues and myself, many of our jobs financially unsustainable, is the concern. And so what we're asking for is just to be able to be a part of the policy construction, but I'll pass that more finesse to Michael.
Thank you, councillors. So coming to the substantial ask that we do have of you today, you will be aware, of course, that this is a significant change to the way that Auckland's transport system operates, and it does have real issues as a part of it. Unions collectively across Auckland are talking about this issue, and we represent 150,000 workers across the city. We take a pragmatic approach. We understand there are potentially real benefits to this being done well, but there are also costs to people. There's also a huge information gap across workers in terms of how it will affect them. We believe there is time to do this well and to do this collaboratively. And so the specific ask that we bring to the governing body is that there's clear political direction, that workers and union representation is involved in the development of design of a time of use charging scheme. We appreciate the work of AT officers in engaging with us already, and we do seek political direction from you, that we do continue to have that we don't just get consulted after a scheme is developed. We think that's the best way of developing a scheme that is effective and fair for everyone. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Just flick your microphone off again, Michael. Thank you. All good. Is that everything wrapped up? Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so questions? Daniel.
Good morning. I actually have a degree of sympathy for the concern that Etu is raising here. The challenge, though, is I'm not sure what the criteria are that would achieve the consensus that you reflect. So what is the character? is a characteristic of the landscape that there is already in place a PT option available as an alternate? Because I think that's going to be difficult. Or is it a situation whereby there are carve-outs, or is it about the quantum of price? What is it that would, what's your batting order in terms of the mitigations that you would see as appropriate to try and address the concern that you're raising?
Thank you, Councillor. We purposefully haven't jumped ahead to that and said that we're going to design up what we think the appropriate mitigation should be at this point. I think you've accurately identified the areas to look at, and that can relate around the timing of the scheme, the way in which a scheme is designed. I believe that there is a case for appropriate exemptions for certain groups or not. I recognise that becomes more difficult. The core ask that we're making at this table is that alongside other affected groups, we're involved in that discussion at the moment so that we can have some sensible and pragmatic discussions about what the mitigation should be. We understand that you are also waiting for the legislation to come forward, which will frame up what you can and can't do. So again, we want to see that and then get into a good discussion about how we can design a fair scheme.
Good. Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I may say, I completely agree with everything that you've said, and would also point out that a lot of the lower wage workers of our city are coming from further away, because that's where the housing has been built from decades of planning debacles. But I do have a question, Chair, or a couple actually. Should the focus be on the design of the charge, or is it even possible to design a charge that makes it fair for the workers you represent?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, as per the previous discussion, I think that clearly is one part of it. As I think you'll be aware, I think councillors probably have been briefed on the way that some of these schemes do operate internationally. The design of the charge itself is one of the areas in which you can consider the equity impacts. I think Tane made some really good points around the fact that we do have some workers who face choices and can shift travel patterns, and others who don't. As Tane has outlined, he's representing a particular group of workers who often have work at hours of the day that are very challenging and at which PT currently doesn't operate. So another consideration is, well, given the revenue that's derived from the scheme, how can that be used to offset some of those issues? Could it be that you look at addressing some of the public transport equity issues that are currently apparent, parts of the city that don't have good public transport connections, times of the day where there's not viable public transport, so that you do start to give people other options. So I think that, alongside the timing, the design of the charge, are all things that need to be sensibly considered and discussed. And we'd actually like to see some real modelling, some sitting down with workers like Tane to understand those patterns of travel as a part of this design process. So it's not just theoretical, we're actually dealing with real workers in their lives and thinking about how this can work in a way that's effective and fair. Anything you'd add, Tane?
I've got one more, yeah. Cool. Thank you very much. You've answered my second question, so I've just got one more as well. So you made a point there on the slides about the cordon versus network approach. Is there anything you could do to elaborate on that? Because that's quite a big issue for my ward in particular.
Yes, simply what we're noting here is that will have different impacts. So, a cordon approach, were it to be applied to the central city, will have a particular impact on workers like Tane and his colleagues. Yeah, there is a particular thing there which I suppose we want to point out, which is that I think there's often a view of the world that central city workers are all working in corporate jobs, in office blocks, and are highly paid. There are a lot of low-paid workers in the central city, and their needs need to be considered as a part of this design process. So just pointing that out in reflective cordon. I mean, the point here obviously is that a network approach potentially affects more people, and with a network approach you potentially run into a situation where more people get affected more times of the day. People make multiple trips. There are certain types of workers we represent, for example, care workers, who travel all around the city all day to go into elderly people's homes to give them important social care. And very often the costs of that work fall on them rather than their employer. So again, if you're going to run that approach, we want to make sure you're sitting down with us and those workers to think about how that works. Maybe you can manage that through a daily cap scheme and other mitigations, but that needs to be an input into a fair design scheme.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So we've got 3 more questions and then we'll wrap it up at that. So, Joe?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Apologies for lateness. Sorry I missed the first part of your presentation, and good to see you, Michael. I used to work hospitality, and I would finish at like 2 a.m. sometimes. So public transport is definitely not an option, not only for safety, but didn't really have very good access to public transport anyway, so I needed my car. So I think it's vital that your voice is at the table, and I appreciate you all being here representing the workers. My question is, do you think we should also be trying to engage with the big employers, you know, like Sky City? I think they have a shuttle service for their workers that are working late at night in the, you know, because they're major hospitality employers. But do you think that would be another viable option, or we just fight on the ground?
That certainly sounds like a good idea. Anything that's going to go towards addressing this issue would make a lot of sense. I do know that they have their own arrangements, but there are many other employers that don't. But yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Greg?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you, gentlemen, for coming along. A few of the tips and points and issues you've already shared, you know, are really good food for thought already. You've only got a couple of minutes for this, you know. So my question is, so thank you for being here. Right? My question's around in terms of the design, could you just clarify who you think you need to be engaging with? Is it with AT staff, or is it ministry staff? Is it a combination? Is there some sort of working party? Can you just explain, you know, who you'd like to be engaging with?
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. We want to be at the table with the senior officers who are designing the scheme that you ultimately and NZTA will be considering. We are aware that the signals sent by the Minister is that NZTA will potentially play an important role in the scheme design alongside the TLA. Whatever one thinks of the merits of that, whoever it is that's involved in the design of the scheme, we want to be at the table with them. And again, I just reiterate the point that we want to be doing that at an early and meaningful stage, rather than, you know, receiving a design and then being consulted on it. There's quite a long time to do this. There's going to be a reasonable run-in across the legislative period, and then across how you can get this set up. So we think there is time for good engagement with us, but also with other key organisations and groups who are going to have a say in this. And I think that's important too in terms of building up the consensus. The reality is, if you went out now and asked the 150,000 union members across Auckland what they thought of this, they would mainly have a negative reaction to it. And some of that will be based on the fact that people don't understand what some of the benefits could be. So let's use the time to design it well, and we can help with that, we believe. But we believe we can also help in terms of giving good information to people about how it could work, and helping people to understand that, yes, there are costs, but there could be benefits as well.
Chris?
Councillor Sayers has actually asked part of my question. So Michael, Tane and Chris, it's really very clear in terms of engaging early, but can I be very clear about my understanding of your position? You are in support, like you say, the benefits are recognised. You're in support of this. It's just about the implementation and therefore the importance of engagement.
I wouldn't quite go that far, Councillor Fletcher. The position that we have taken has simply been to say that we, as unions, our job is to be pragmatic. Organisations make decisions that affect the lives of working people, and it's our responsibility and duty to get the best outcome out of that as we can for working people. I don't think we would have a mandate at this stage to go out and say, yes, we support, or no, we oppose, because we haven't gone out and fully engaged with our members as a union, nor have other unions. But we do know that these impacts that we have identified are real. And as I say, we're prepared to have a mature, constructive discussion which recognises the benefits and then looks at the ways in which we can manage the costs or disbenefits to workers as fairly as possible.
Is it intended that at some future point you will engage with your members to identify whether you are then in support or otherwise?
Potentially, we will consider that. And as I say, unions across Auckland, and we do represent about 150,000 people, so it's a lot of people, can consider doing that. One of the things I have informally suggested to some of the AT officers, and again, just acknowledging them that they have reached out positively to us so far. There's no criticism of them in what we've presented today. We've said, for example, that one of the useful roles that we could play would be in helping to gather up workers, union delegates, people from parts of the city who are going to be affected by this in different ways, and helping to facilitate engagement between AT, Auckland Council, NZTA around how this could be designed in an effective way.
Thanks, if required.
Okay, so thanks for that. I did indicate that was the end of it. We've had a good thrash in it. At the end of the day, this is right at the very start of a process, and it's coming up next anyway on the agenda. So Chris has moved the vote of thanks. Shane is happy to second. Anything further? None. Those in favour say aye. Oh, I'd called the done. I mean, as I say, we're at the very start of a process, and we've had a good nut at this, and we started late.
I understand that, but it was a particular question rather than a comment. I'll ask them later on.
Yeah, if you could, that'd take it offline. That'd be good. We're going to keep the time. Okay. Those in favour say aye, and against. Aye. Carried. Thank you all. I think we did that twice. Nice work. So thank you. Michael, Chris, Tane,